So we will identify symbolism, foreshadowing, and motif in to be or not to be. Now, remember that these elements, especially motif and symbolism, can overlap. So our first symbol is the painting or the mural and the drop cloth. They go together because obviously the painter's using the drop cloth to clean up spillage. And those would be symbols, all right? So the painting is literally people in purple uniforms carrying weeds, right? That's symbolic of Leora Duncan and Dr. Hitz. They're in charge of this population control. Um, and they're carrying it to these trash burners. And it's this beautiful garden where the plants are all cared for and pruned, and everything that's dead and decaying is taken out of the garden, symbolic of our society, right? You also have this orderly song. This foreshadows, it's symbolic of what the society is based on. The only reason that things are so idyllic and utopian feeling is because people have to volunteer to die. And you also have to think, what about all the parents that cannot find a volunteer? That's called infanticide when babies are killed. So this is not an idyllic society, because even though everyone is thriving with all the resources that they need, and there's not pollution or crowding or plague or disease or aging, everyone can live forever. There's this underlying conversations of what's happening in these hospital rooms, what's happening when families, parents find out that they're pregnant. Like those underlying conversations that aren't talked about in this song or by Dr. Hitz and Leora, that's our issue. So this is what it's symbolic of. Even though things look beautiful and thriving, that is not the case. There's ugliness and infanticide and murder underneath it all, right? And then also the color purple is going to be symbolic. Purple in literature symbolizes royalty and like power, influence. So the fact that they're purple and in the song, well, they're wearing purple clothing, purple uniforms. This symbolizes, right? So Kurt Vonnegut picks this color purple on purpose. He's a famous author. That's what he does. There's no randomness to him choosing that color. It could symbolize that in this society, the Edwards are the ones that maybe have to sacrifice their children and loved ones. Whereas those in power, we might assume that's not the case. And they're also almost celebrated and worshipped in a way. Even though it is kind of normal to have hospital murals with like staff, but we're reading this for the purpose of literary analysis, so we can be judgmental if we want to. The next motif, well, also the so symbol. The mural is also symbol or a motif. So we have the mural as a symbol. We can say the mural is also a motif because they talk about it throughout the entire story, right? Mural represents the mural. The mural is a motif that is the center of the story's action. Um, the reader learns through the painter's conversation. And we won't say that. What can we say? The motif, we want to say how the mural is a motif. We could say the mural shows how some people in the society are valued more than others. And the messy drop cloth represents the way the world truly is. So those would be your motifs, representing how things really are. So the drop cloth and the mural, for the motif, they could go together because anytime he's mentioning the mural, he's also mentioning the drop cloth. the gas chambers is most definitely a motif. It's mentioned several times, and we can also say that the gas chamber represents irony. Okay, because wait, so if I was going to say the story's gas chambers are ironic in this because they are celebrated in this story. I don't like to use this twice, so I'm going to say the gas chambers are ironic because they are celebrated in the story. However, gas chambers are associated with the Holocaust. So that is ironic, okay? Because gas chambers aren't supposed to be celebrated. Um, but you can also say the Federal Bureau of Termination gas chambers where suicides take place, in requiring that each new life come at the cost of any other one, the government assumes that lives are interchangeable. It does not matter which person volunteers to die, as long as there's a volunteer for each birth. And then if you were to watch an Extinction, this is an interview from Extinction Rebellion, the founder of it, and it's this group that protests against climate change. And basically, you could say that there's already suffering from lack of resources. And no matter what in a society, um, we have the gas chambers and the Federal Bureau of Termination, but we might ask ourselves if this is equal. Is are the gas chambers, if you're a wealthy person and you're in your 300, you're 300 years old, are you going to be pressured by your loved ones to end your life when they're having a baby? Or do we think that there might be options for the wealthy and powerful to have their children and live forever as well? We don't know. Um, Another motif is we could say the dunking and all of the words used for gas chamber hostesses, those sayings that offended Leora. Um, we could say that's a motif. It shows that there is negativity against this policy. Like people wouldn't have came up with all these derogatory names for suicide and the suicide prevention unless, see, there was negative associated with it. So these would be all the negative idioms. Cat box, that's something you would say about people's like grave, I guess. But we could say that all of these idioms for the to be or not to be, that is an example of motif where it keeps coming up. And then one more motif you could say, the drop cloth, the paintings. We could say the gun was a motif. Well, not exactly because it only comes up once. You could say the revolver is symbolic of, we could say it's symbolic. So wait, if I go back down to foreshadowing, or I want to go to the revolver. Um, the revolver, we can say the revolver symbolizes um, human, we could say the revolver symbolizes mankind's tendency to solve problems with violence. Then we can say it, we can also say it's a symbol, right? Because this is big. In the beginning, the narrator told us there was no crime, but then we see crime. So we could say um, the revolver represents the hypocrisy of the society and then we could say in the story's exposition the narrator informs the reader that America is free of crime. However, in the story, the climax involves Edward shooting Leora, Dr. Hitz, and himself. This incident negates the concept of a utopia and leads the reader to believe this world is not a good place. Like it's built on lies. You could say negates the concept of utopia and leads the reader to believe the thriving society is built on violence and oppression. That's what your gun really represents. And a gun kind of, you could say a gun in any story symbolizes oppression or violence, or you could usually find something. So that would be symbolism, irony, and motif.